I'm David, a 38-year-old guy living what I once thought was a pretty decent life. My wife Jessica and I have been together for 13 years, married for 10. We've always been a solid couple, or so I believed. She's 36, and while we've had our ups and downs, I always thought we had an understanding, a mutual respect that kept us going strong. We don't have kids, which has made our relationship mostly about the two of us. Maybe that was part of the problem, or maybe it was something else entirely. Lately, though, things have been off. It's hard to pinpoint exactly when the shift happened, but the signs were there if I really think about it. Jessica started spending more time away from home, claiming she needed space or time for herself. At first, I didn't think much of it. Everyone needs their own time, right? But then she started going out more frequently, often with a new friend from the gym. I had no issue with her having friends, male or female, but this felt different. Jessica's behavior began to change. She was always a bit high-strung, but now she seemed perpetually on edge, like she was hiding something. Our conversations became shorter, her answers more curt. She was constantly on her phone, and whenever I asked who she was texting, she'd just say it was a friend or someone from work. I didn't push too hard. I trusted her. One Saturday, she told me she was heading out to buy some things for the house. It struck me as odd because Jessica hates shopping, especially alone. But what really raised a red flag was how much effort she put into getting ready. She spent hours doing her hair and makeup, picked out an outfit that she usually reserved for special occasions, and even put on the sexy underwear she typically saved for our private moments. Something wasn't adding up. As the hours ticked by, I started to get a sinking feeling in my gut. She was out much longer than she needed to be for a simple shopping trip. I tried to distract myself, watching TV and fiddling around the house, but my mind kept drifting back to Jessica and her strange behavior. When she finally came home, she seemed distant, almost evasive. I asked her about her day, trying to gauge her mood. She brushed me off, saying she was just tired and didn't feel like talking. This wasn't the Jessica I knew. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. That night, as we lay in bed, I found myself wide awake, my mind racing with thoughts of what she might be up to. I remembered seeing a new name pop up on her phone a few times. Mark, someone she claimed was a friend from the gym. But the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like there might be more to their relationship than she was letting on. Our sex life had taken a nosedive over the past couple of months, and Jessica had grown increasingly hostile without any clear reason. I tried to be supportive, doing everything I could around the house, taking care of chores, and making sure she didn't have to worry about anything. But no matter what I did, it never seemed to be enough. One night, she told me she didn't want to be married anymore. She said it wasn't about me, but how could it not be? I felt utterly shattered, like my world was crumbling around me. I didn't know how to talk to her about it because every time I tried, she shut down or got defensive. Communicating with her had become a nightmare. I felt trapped, suffocated by the uncertainty and the growing suspicion that my wife was cheating on me. But without concrete proof, what could I do? I didn't want to jump to conclusions and ruin what we had, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. After a restless night filled with suspicion and dread, I decided to take action. I couldn't just sit around wondering what Jessica was up to. I needed answers. The gym seemed like a good place to start. She'd been spending an increasing amount of time there, and I figured I'd drop by to see if I could catch her in the act, or at least get some peace of mind. The next morning, I told Jessica I had some errands to run and left the house earlier than usual. My heart was pounding as I drove to the gym. I wasn't sure what I'd find, but I had to know. When I arrived, I scanned the parking lot for her car and saw it parked near the entrance. That sinking feeling in my gut intensified. I walked into the gym, trying to look casual. The front desk attendant greeted me and I nodded, pretending I was just there for a workout. My eyes darted around the gym, looking for Jessica. She was nowhere to be seen. I checked the treadmills, the weight area, even the yoga studio. Nothing. My mind raced with possibilities, each more disturbing than the last. I approached one of the gym trainers, a burly guy named Tom, who had always been friendly. "Hey, have you seen Jessica around?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Tom gave me a curious look. Yeah, I saw her earlier. I think she headed toward the locker rooms. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. The locker rooms? I thanked Tom and made my way to the back of the gym. The closer I got, the more I could hear muffled sounds coming from the women's locker room. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I pushed open the door to the men's locker room, my mind racing. Was she really in there? I walked through the rows of lockers, my footsteps echoing in the empty room. Then I heard it, a faint, unmistakable sound of moaning and heavy breathing. My blood ran cold. I followed the sounds, rounding a corner to find a door that connected the men's and women's locker rooms. It was slightly ajar. I peeked through the crack and my worst fears were confirmed. There she was, Jessica, with a guy I didn't recognize. They were on a bench, completely oblivious to my presence. The sight made my stomach turn. Rage surged through me. I didn't think, I just acted. I kicked the door open, startling them both. "What the hell is going on here?" I shouted, my voice echoing off the tiled walls. Jessica scrambled to cover herself, her face a mask of shock and fear. The guy, a young gym employee, tried to stand up, but I was on him in a flash. I swung at him, my fist connecting with his eyebrow. He staggered back, blood trickling down his face. "David, stop!" Jessica screamed, but I was beyond reasoning. The guy tried to defend himself, but I was too enraged to care. I hit him again, harder this time, sending him crashing to the floor. He groaned in pain, clutching his bleeding eyebrow. Jessica was crying, trying to pull me away. "Please, David, stop. You're going to get arrested." Her words broke through my haze of fury. I stepped back, breathing heavily, my knuckles throbbing. The guy on the floor was moaning, clearly in pain. I looked at Jessica, her tear-streaked face filled with a mixture of fear and guilt. The reality of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. "How could you?" I spat, my voice trembling with anger and betrayal. "How could you do this to us?" Jessica sobbed, her hands shaking. "I'm sorry, David. I didn't mean for this to happen. It just happened." "That's your excuse?" I snapped. "It just happened." She didn't have an answer. The guy on the floor groaned again, and I realized we needed to get out of there before things got worse. I grabbed Jessica's arm and pulled her toward the exit. "We're leaving," I said, my voice cold and final. Jessica didn't resist. She followed me out of the locker room, leaving the guy to deal with his own mess. As we walked through the gym, people stared. But I didn't care. I just needed to get out of there, away from the scene of her betrayal. We drove home in silence, the air between us thick with tension. My mind was racing, trying to process what had just happened. I felt like my world had been turned upside down, and I didn't know how to make sense of it. When we got home, Jessica tried to speak, but I cut her off. "Save it. I don't want to hear your excuses right now." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I went to the bedroom, slamming the door behind me. I needed space, time to think about what to do next. My trust in Jessica was shattered, and I didn't know if I could ever put the pieces back together. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the scene over and over again. The sight of her with that guy, the feel of my fist connecting with his face, it all felt surreal, like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. I knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same again. After the shock and rage of discovering Jessica's betrayal, I spent hours alone in our bedroom, trying to make sense of everything. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together in that locker room, a scene that made my stomach churn. The trust we'd built over 13 years shattered in an instant, leaving me feeling raw and exposed. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the room, I knew I had to take action. Sitting there, wallowing in my pain, wasn't going to change anything. I needed to reclaim some semblance of control over my life, starting with removing Jessica from it. I emerged from the bedroom, my face set with grim determination. Jessica was sitting on the living room couch, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked up as I entered, a mix of hope and dread in her expression. But I wasn't interested in listening to her excuses or apologies. "Get up," I said, my voice cold and hard. Jessica flinched, but did as I asked. "David, please, can we talk about this?" I ignored her and headed to our bedroom. I grabbed a few trash bags from the closet and began throwing her things into them. Clothes, shoes, toiletries, anything that belonged to her. I was methodical, almost robotic in my actions. Each item I tossed into the bags was a step toward purging her from my life. Jessica stood in the doorway, watching in stunned silence. "David, please stop," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "We can work this out." I turned to face her, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. "Work this out? You were fucking another man in a gym locker room. There's nothing to work out." Her face crumpled, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I made a mistake. I was lonely, and I made a terrible mistake. Please, just give me a chance to explain." I shook my head, throwing another handful of her clothes into the bag. "I don't want to hear it, Jessica. You betrayed me. You betrayed us." I zipped up the bags and hauled them out of the bedroom, brushing past her as I went. I could hear her sobbing behind me, but I forced myself not to care. My mind was set. I wasn't going to let her stay another night under the same roof. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with the consequences. I dragged the bags out to the curb, tossing them into the trash bin. Each thud of the bags hitting the bottom felt like a small release of the pent-up anger inside me. When I turned back to the house, Jessica was standing in the doorway, her face a mask of despair. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's not my problem," I replied, my tone devoid of any sympathy. "You should have thought about that before you decided to cheat." She hesitated, then stepped outside, wrapping her arms around herself as if to ward off the chill of the evening air. "David, please, I don't have anywhere to go. Just let me stay here tonight, and I'll leave in the morning." I stared at her for a long moment, torn between my lingering love for the woman I thought she was and the betrayal she had become. Finally, I shook my head. "No, you need to leave now." Jessica's shoulders slumped in defeat. She turned and walked back inside to grab her purse and keys. I watched her, making sure she took nothing else. When she was ready to leave, she paused at the door, looking back at me with tear-filled eyes. "I'm sorry, David," she whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Well, you did," I said, my voice cold and unyielding. "And now you have to live with that." She nodded and walked out the door. I stood there, watching as she got into her car and drove away. The sound of the engine faded into the distance, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. I closed the door and locked it, the finality of the click echoing in the empty house. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside my mind. I sank onto the couch, staring blankly at the wall, feeling a strange mix of relief and sorrow. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life, but the path ahead was uncertain and filled with pain. The woman I loved, the life we had built together, was gone. All that remained was the bitter taste of betrayal and the daunting task of moving forward. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept replaying the events of the day over and over in my mind, questioning everything I thought I knew about our relationship. The hurt was still raw, the anger simmering just beneath the surface, but amidst the turmoil, there was a small, flickering spark of resolve. I would get through this. I had to. As dawn broke, casting a pale light across the room, I felt a sense of grim determination settle over me. This was just the beginning of a long, painful journey, but I was ready to face it head on. Jessica was gone, and now it was time to rebuild my life from the ashes of our broken marriage. The days following Jessica's departure were some of the hardest I've ever faced. The house felt like a hollow shell, every room a stark reminder of the life we'd shared and the betrayal that had shattered it. I couldn't escape the memories, the laughter, the shared dreams, the plans for the future. All of it now tainted by the image of her with another man. I threw myself into work, hoping to drown out the pain with busy hands and a preoccupied mind. But even there, I couldn't escape. My colleagues noticed the change in me, the way I seemed distant and distracted. A few asked if I was okay, but I brushed them off with weak reassurances. I wasn't ready to talk about it, not with anyone. At night, the loneliness was the worst. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our relationship. How had I missed the signs? How long had she been unhappy? The questions were endless, and the answers elusive. I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of it all. One night, after tossing and turning for hours, I got up and wandered through the house. I ended up in what used to be our bedroom, now just another empty room. Her scent still lingered on the pillows, a cruel reminder of what I'd lost. I sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands, and for the first time since she left, I let myself cry. The tears came in a torrent, a release of all the anger, hurt, and betrayal I'd been holding in. I cried for the life we'd built, for the love I thought we shared, and for the future that was now nothing but a painful memory. It felt like I was being torn apart from the inside, every sob a knife twisting deeper into my heart. In the midst of my breakdown, my phone buzzed. I wiped my eyes and looked at the screen. It was a text from my best friend, Steve. He'd been trying to reach out ever since he heard about what happened, but I'd been avoiding him. I didn't want to face the pity, the inevitable questions, but tonight, I needed someone. I needed to feel less alone. "Hey man, just checking in. You okay?" the text read. I hesitated for a moment, then typed back, "No, not really. Can we talk?" Steve called almost immediately. His voice was a lifeline, steady and supportive. "What's going on, David?" I took a deep breath and poured out everything. The affair, the confrontation at the gym, kicking Jessica out. Steve listened without interrupting, letting me get it all out. When I finished, there was a long silence. "Jesus, David," he finally said. "I'm so sorry. I can't imagine what you're going through." "Neither can I admitted, my voice raw. "I don't know how to move on from this." "You don't have to do it alone," Steve said. "I'm here for you, man, whatever you need." We talked for a long time, longer than we had in years. Steve reminded me that I still had people who cared about me, who would help me through this. It was a small comfort, but it was enough to keep me going for another day. The following weeks were a blur of emotions. Some days, I felt like I was making progress, like I could see a glimmer of hope on the horizon. Other days, the pain and anger were so overwhelming that it felt like I was back at square one. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Evans, who helped me navigate the emotional minefield that was now my life. Dr. Evans encouraged me to confront my feelings head-on, to allow myself to grieve the loss of my marriage. She also helped me understand that Jessica's actions were not a reflection of my worth. It was a hard pill to swallow, but slowly, I started to believe it. One particularly difficult session, I broke down again. "I just don't understand why she did it," I said, my voice choked with tears. "Was I not enough?" Dr. Evans looked at me with compassion. "David, infidelity is complex. It's rarely about one person being enough or not. It often stems from deeper issues within the person who cheats. It's about their insecurities, their dissatisfaction with themselves. It's not a reflection of your value or your efforts in the relationship." I nodded, trying to absorb her words. It was a perspective I hadn't considered, and it brought a small measure of peace. Outside of therapy, I tried to rebuild my life, piece by piece. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years, people I'd lost touch with because I'd been so wrapped up in my marriage. I started going out more, trying new activities, anything to distract myself from the gnawing void left by Jessica's betrayal. One evening, Steve dragged me to a social event at a local bar. I was reluctant at first, but he insisted it would do me good to get out and meet new people. The bar was crowded and noisy, but there was an energy to it that felt invigorating. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of excitement. We found a table and ordered drinks. As the night went on, I started to relax, laughing and joking with Steve and his friends. It was a welcome escape from the constant turmoil in my mind. Then, I noticed a woman sitting alone at the bar, looking just as out of place as I felt. She caught my eye and smiled. "Who's that?" Steve asked, nudging me. "No idea," I said, my curiosity piqued. "Well, go find out," he urged, giving me a playful shove. I hesitated, then took a deep breath and walked over to her. "Hi, I'm David," I said, offering a smile. She smiled back, a hint of curiosity in her eyes. "Hi, David. I'm Sarah." We started talking, and I was surprised at how easy it was to connect with her. She was kind, funny, and had a way of making me forget, even if just for a moment, about the pain I was carrying. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing, and by the end of the night, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. As we exchanged numbers, I realized that maybe, just maybe, there was hope for me yet. It wouldn't be easy, and the road ahead was still long and uncertain, but I was starting to believe that I could find happiness again. With the support of friends like Steve and new connections like Sarah, I knew I wasn't alone in this journey, and that made all the difference. The encounter with Sarah was a turning point. It showed me that life could still hold moments of connection and joy, even amid the chaos of my shattered marriage. But it also highlighted the necessity of making a final decision about my relationship with Jessica. I couldn't continue living in this limbo, holding onto the remnants of a life that no longer existed. I decided it was time to pursue a divorce. The very thought filled me with a mix of dread and relief. Dread because it meant acknowledging the end of a significant chapter in my life, and relief because it was a step toward reclaiming my future. I called my lawyer Janet, who had been handling the initial stages of my separation from Jessica. She was a no-nonsense professional, highly recommended by Steve. Janet assured me that we had a strong case, given Jessica's infidelity, and that we could aim for an uncontested divorce if Jessica cooperated. "David, the first step is to serve her with the divorce papers," Janet explained during our meeting. "We'll need to be prepared for any reaction she might have. How do you think she'll take it?" I sighed, rubbing my temples. "I honestly don't know, Janet. She's been so unpredictable lately. Part of me hopes she'll just accept it and move on. But another part of me fears she'll make this as difficult as possible." Janet nodded, her expression sympathetic. "We'll handle whatever comes our way. Just stay strong and focus on the end goal. Your freedom and peace of mind." With a heavy heart, I signed the necessary documents and left Janet's office, feeling the weight of finality settling over me. It was time to face Jessica and deliver the news. I arranged to meet Jessica at a neutral location, a small cafe near our former home. She arrived looking anxious and worn, her eyes searching mine for any hint of what was to come. "David, what's this about?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation. "Jessica, we need to talk. I've decided to file for divorce." Her face paled, and she sat down heavily in the chair across from me. "Divorce? David, can't we try to work this out? Go to counseling or something?" I shook my head, feeling a pang of sorrow for what might have been. "We've tried, Jessica, but your betrayal has destroyed the foundation of our marriage. I can't keep living like this. It's time for both of us to move on." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she reached across the table, grasping my hands. "Please, David, give me another chance. I know I messed up, but I love you. I don't want to lose you." Her desperation was palpable, but I couldn't let myself be swayed. "Jessica, I loved you too, but love isn't enough to fix this. Trust is broken, and without it, we have nothing." She sobbed, her grip tightening on my hands. "What am I supposed to do? Where will I go?" I gently pulled my hands away, my heart aching for the woman I once knew. "You'll figure it out, Jessica. You're strong, but we can't do this together anymore." I handed her the divorce papers, watching as she stared at them through her tears. "Please sign these, Jessica. Let's end this amicably." Her shoulders shook with silent sobs, but she nodded, accepting the inevitable. "Fine, David. I'll sign them. But please, know that I'm sorry. For everything." I nodded, unable to find the words to respond. I stood up, feeling the finality of the moment. "Take care of yourself, Jessica." As I walked out of the cafe, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. The chapter with Jessica was closing, but a new one was beginning. One where I could rebuild my life and find happiness on my own terms. Over the next few weeks, Jessica and I navigated the logistics of our separation. She signed the papers, and Janet filed them with the court. We divided our assets and agreed on the terms of the divorce. Despite the emotional turmoil, we managed to keep things civil, both recognizing the need to move forward. Throughout this process, Sarah became a steady presence in my life. We spent more time together, growing closer with each passing day. She was supportive, understanding, and patient, everything I needed as I navigated the end of my marriage. One evening, after a long day of dealing with divorce paperwork, I found myself at Sarah's apartment. We were sitting on her couch, a bottle of wine between us. She listened as I vented about the frustrations and sadness of the day, offering a comforting presence. "David, you're doing the right thing," she said softly, taking my hand. "It may be painful now, but you're creating a better future for yourself." I looked into her eyes, grateful for her support. "Thank you, Sarah. I don't know what I'd do without you." She smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "You'll never have to find out." As the divorce proceedings neared their conclusion, I began to feel a sense of closure. Jessica and I had one final meeting to finalize the details and say our goodbyes. It was a bittersweet moment, filled with memories of the life we'd shared and the acknowledgement that it was time to let go. "Goodbye, Jessica," I said, my voice steady. "I hope you find peace and happiness." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "Goodbye, David. I wish you the same." With that, we parted ways, closing the chapter on our marriage. It was a painful but necessary step toward healing and rebuilding my life. As I walked away from our final meeting, I felt a sense of liberation. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape. With Sarah by my side and the support of friends like Steve, I knew I could face whatever came next. The divorce was finalized a few weeks later, and I stood outside the courthouse, feeling a mix of emotions: sadness for what was lost, relief for what was over, and hope for what lay ahead. I called Sarah, wanting to share the news. "It's done," I said when she answered. "The divorce is final." "How do you feel?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "Relieved," I admitted, "and ready to move forward." "Good," she said, her smile evident in her voice. "Let's celebrate tonight. You deserve it." That evening, Sarah and I toasted to new beginnings. It was a celebration not just of the end of my marriage, but of the promise of a future filled with possibility and hope. As we clinked our glasses together, I realized that the journey of healing and rebuilding was just beginning. But with the support of those who cared about me and the strength I'd found within myself, I knew I was ready to face whatever the future held. Months passed, and life slowly began to regain a sense of normalcy. The immediate sting of Jessica's betrayal faded into a dull ache, a reminder of lessons learned and resilience gained. With the divorce finalized, I focused on rebuilding my life and embracing the opportunities that lay ahead. Sarah and I grew closer, our bond deepening with each passing day. She became my confidant, my partner, and my best friend. Together, we navigated the complexities of our pasts and forged a path forward built on trust and mutual respect. One crisp autumn evening, Sarah and I took a walk in the park near my apartment. The leaves had turned brilliant shades of red and gold, and the air was filled with the scent of fall. As we strolled hand in hand, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. "David, do you ever think about the future?" Sarah asked, her voice gentle. I smiled, squeezing her hand. "All the time. And you know what? For the first time in a long time, I'm excited about it." She looked up at me, her eyes sparkling. "Me too." We found a bench and sat down, watching the sunset paint the sky with vibrant hues. The world felt full of possibilities, and I realized that I had come a long way from the man who had been shattered by betrayal. "Sarah," I began, turning to face her, "I want you to know how much you've meant to me these past few months. You've been my rock, and I don't know where I'd be without you." She smiled, her eyes misting with emotion. "You've meant just as much to me, David. I'm so grateful we found each other." I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. "I know it's still early, but I can't imagine my life without you. I want to build a future together, one where we support and uplift each other." Tears slipped down her cheeks as she nodded. "I'd love that, David. I feel the same way." We sat in silence for a while, soaking in the beauty of the moment and the promise of the future. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a sense of closure and new beginnings intertwining, creating a tapestry of hope and healing. In the weeks that followed, Sarah and I took steps to solidify our future together. We talked about our dreams, our goals, and the life we wanted to create. It was a collaborative effort, built on open communication and mutual respect. I also took the time to reflect on the lessons learned from my marriage to Jessica. The pain and betrayal had taught me the importance of trust, honesty, and vulnerability. It had shown me my own strength and resilience, and for that, I was grateful. One evening, as Sarah and I prepared dinner together, she turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "David, do you ever think about forgiveness? Not just for Jessica, but for yourself?" I paused, considering her words. "I have. It's been a journey, but I think I'm getting there. Forgiving Jessica doesn't mean excusing her actions, but it does mean letting go of the anger and hurt. And forgiving myself means acknowledging that I did my best and that I'm worthy of happiness." She smiled, nodding in agreement. "I think that's beautiful. Healing isn't just about moving on, it's about finding peace within ourselves." Her words resonated deeply, and I realized that my journey of healing was ongoing. Each day was a step toward greater self-awareness and acceptance, and with Sarah by my side, I felt supported and loved in a way I hadn't thought possible. As the years passed, Sarah and I built a life filled with love, laughter, and shared dreams. We traveled, explored new hobbies, and created countless memories together. Our relationship was a testament to the power of resilience and the beauty of second chances. Looking back, I saw how far I'd come since the day I discovered Jessica's betrayal. The pain and heartbreak had given way to a profound sense of growth and renewal. I had learned to embrace life's uncertainties, finding strength in vulnerability and joy in the simple moments. Jessica and I remained distant but civil, communicating only when necessary. She eventually moved on with her life, and I wished her well from afar. Our paths had diverged, but the lessons learned from our time together would always be a part of my story. As I sat on the porch one evening, watching the sun set over the horizon, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. The journey had been arduous, but it had led me to a place of peace and fulfillment. I had found love again, not just with Sarah, but with myself. Life was unpredictable and filled with challenges, but it was also rich with opportunities for growth and connection. I had faced the darkest moments of my life and emerged stronger, ready to embrace whatever the future held. With Sarah by my side, I knew we could navigate anything together. Our love was a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the face of betrayal and heartbreak, there was always the possibility of new beginnings. And so, as the stars twinkled above and the cool breeze whispered through the trees, I closed my eyes and breathed in the promise of tomorrow. It was a new day, a new chapter, and I was ready to write it with love, courage, and an open heart.